Tonight, we quiz to sleep, learning about the human body. Across 13 quiet sections, from the whole organism to individual systems, you'll be gently guided deeper into clarity and rest, while a soft 7 Hz tone layered with rain-like pink noise plays gently beneath the voice, helping anchor that state and support deep sleep and memory consolidation. There are no correct answers tonight, no pressure, no judgment. You'll hear each question, feel a pause, and drift further, letting the knowledge settle gently into your subconscious. Sleep deeper, wake brighter. Section 1. The human body. The human body is an integrated network of tissues, organs, fluids, and pathways that power movement, protection, communication, and the regulation of internal balance. Which is the largest organ by surface area in the human body? A. Skin. B. Liver. C. Heart. Answer: A. Skin. The skin covers our entire external surface and serves as a multifunctional protective barrier. How many bones are in a typical adult human skeleton? A. 206. B. 190. C. 185. Answer: A. 206. Most adults have 206 bones, though that number may slightly vary due to fused bones. Approximately what percentage of an adult's body weight is made up of water? A. 60%. B. 40%. C. 80%. Answer: A. 60%. On average, about 60% of an adult's body mass is water, essential for hydration and metabolism. What is the longest bone in the adult human body? A. Femur. B. Tibia. C. Humerus. Answer: A. Femur. The femur, or thigh bone, is the body's longest bone from hip to knee. Which bone can handle up to 30 times body weight and is crucial for walking and jumping? A. Femur. B. Spine, vertebrae. C. Tibia. Answer: A. Femur. The femur is not only the longest bone, but is also the strongest, supporting massive loads during movement. How many primary tissue categories are recognized in the human body? A. 4. B. 3. C. 6. Answer: A. 4. The 4 basic tissue types are epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. What structural level comes next above tissues in the organization of the human body? A. Organ. B. System. C. Cell. Answer: A. Organ. Different tissues combine to form organs like the heart, lungs, or liver. Where is most of the body's total water volume found? A. Inside cells, intracellular. B. In blood plasma. C. Between cells, interstitial. Answer: A. Inside cells. About 2/3 of total body water is stored inside cells, rather than in circulation or interstitial spaces. Which part of a bone is chiefly responsible for producing red and white blood cells? A. Bone marrow. B. Compact bone. C. Endosteum. Answer: A. Bone marrow. Bone marrow is where hematopoietic stem cells generate new blood cells throughout life. Bone marrow makes up approximately what percentage of an adult's body mass? A. About 5%. B. About 10%. C. About 15%. Answer: A. About 5%. In a healthy adult, bone marrow accounts for roughly 5% of total body weight. Which system of the body includes the heart and blood vessels and is responsible for transporting nutrients and gases? A. Circulatory System. B. Respiratory System. C. Digestive System. Answer: A. Circulatory System. The circulatory system moves oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, and waste products through blood vessels powered by the heart. What percentage of the human body is typically composed of skeletal muscle mass? A. 40%. B. 20%. C. 10%. Answer: A. 40%. Skeletal muscle accounts for about 40% of body mass in a healthy adult, supporting posture and movement. Which type of cell contains hemoglobin and is responsible for oxygen transport in the body? A. Red blood cell. B. White blood cell. C. Platelet. Answer: A. Red blood cell. Red blood cells, or erythrocytes, carry oxygen using hemoglobin molecules to tissues throughout the body. Which of the following systems plays a primary role in defending the body from infections and foreign substances? A. Immune system. B. Nervous system. C. Muscular system. Answer: A. Immune system. The immune system, composed of white blood cells, lymph nodes, and antibodies, protects against disease and infection. Which internal organ is primarily responsible for filtering toxins and processing nutrients from the blood? A. Liver. B. Pancreas. C. Kidney. Answer: A. Liver. The liver filters harmful substances from the blood, metabolizes drugs, and helps process nutrients like glucose and fats. Section 2. Homeostasis. Homeostasis is the dynamic self-regulating process that maintains internal stability, controlling variables like temperature, pH, and blood chemistry, even as the external environment changes. What is the definition of homeostasis? A. Maintaining a stable internal environment despite external change. B. Rapidly matching external conditions in real time. C. Fully replacing internal systems continuously. Answer. A. Maintaining a stable internal environment despite external change. Homeostasis is how organisms keep variables like temperature, pH, and fluid volume relatively constant even as their surroundings change. What type of feedback mechanism is most common in regulating internal body variables? A. Negative feedback. B. Positive feedback. C. Feed-forward control. Answer. A. Negative feedback. Negative feedback loops are how systems counteract deviations from set points to restore equilibrium. Which effector helps lower body temperature when the core is too hot? A. Sweat glands. B. Hair follicles. C. Piloerector muscles. Answer. A. Sweat glands. Eccrine sweat glands secrete fluid that evaporates from the skin, facilitating heat loss and cooling the body. Which hormone raises blood glucose when levels fall too low? A. Insulin. B. Glucagon. C. Cortisol. Answer. B. Glucagon. Glucagon stimulates the liver to break down glycogen into glucose and release it into the bloodstream. Which hormone lowers elevated blood glucose levels? A. Insulin. B. Glucagon. C. Somatostatin. Answer. A. Insulin. Insulin fosters uptake and storage of glucose by liver, muscle, and fat tissue, reducing blood sugar after meals. Which buffer system maintains blood pH around 7.4? A. Bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer. B. Protein buffer system. C. Phosphate buffer system. Answer. A. Bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer. This buffer system, along with respiratory and renal regulation, keeps blood pH tightly near 7.4. Which hormone increases water reabsorption in the kidney when plasma osmolarity is high? A. Antidiuretic hormone. B. Aldosterone. C. Atrial natriuretic peptide. Answer: A. Antidiuretic hormone. ADH increases aquaporin channels to conserve water and lower plasma osmolarity during dehydration or hypertonicity. Which hormone raises blood calcium when levels are low? A. Parathyroid hormone. B. Calcitonin. C. Thyroxine. Answer: A. Parathyroid hormone. PTH triggers calcium release from bone, increases renal reabsorption, and stimulates active vitamin D production for absorption. Which sensors detect short-term changes in blood pressure and trigger fast responses? A. Arterial baroreceptors in the carotid sinus and aortic arch. B. Chemoreceptors in carotid bodies. C. Osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. Answer: A. Arterial baroreceptors in the carotid sinus and aortic arch. These stretch-sensitive sensors detect arterial pressure changes and adjust heart rate and vessel tone through autonomic signaling. Which brain region integrates signals of temperature, thirst, and blood pressure to regulate homeostasis? A. Hypothalamus. B. Medulla oblongata. C. Pancreas. Answer: A. Hypothalamus. The hypothalamus coordinates sensory input and initiates hormonal and neural responses to maintain a physiologically stable internal environment. Which organ is primarily responsible for maintaining long-term blood pressure and fluid volume homeostasis? A. Kidneys. B. Heart. C. Lungs. Answer: A. Kidneys. The kidneys regulate blood pressure via the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system and adjust fluid excretion to keep blood volume stable. 12. Which hormone is secreted from the adrenal medulla as part of the acute fight-or-flight homeostatic response? A. Epinephrine, adrenaline. B. Cortisol. C. Norepinephrine. Answer: A. Epinephrine, adrenaline. Epinephrine is released rapidly into the bloodstream under stress to increase heart rate, blood flow, and elevate blood glucose. 13. What type of receptors in the medulla detect elevated carbon dioxide and drive the regulation of breathing rate? A. Central chemoreceptors. B. Baroreceptors. C. Thermoreceptors. Answer: A. Central chemoreceptors. These chemoreceptors sense changes in pH from rising CO2 and stimulate ventilation to restore acid-base balance. 14. What control mechanism anticipates a disturbance, such as salivating before a meal, to limit homeostatic disruption? A. Feed-forward control. B. Negative feedback. C. Positive feedback. Answer: A. Feed-forward control. Feed-forward mechanisms act before the change actually occurs, like salivation when food is smelled, to minimize physiological disturbance. 15. Which kidney-mediated mechanism restores blood osmolarity during dehydration by conserving water? A. Increasing ADH to reabsorb water. B. Increasing glomerular filtration rate. C. Blocking sodium reabsorption. Answer: A. Increasing ADH to reabsorb water. ADH causes the kidneys to reabsorb water through aquaporins, reducing urine volume and restoring osmotic balance. Section 3. Nervous System. The nervous system coordinates rapid signaling using neurons, combining sensory input, central processing, and motor responses to control both conscious actions and autonomic functions. What are the two main subdivisions of the nervous system? A. Central and peripheral nervous systems. B. Brain and digestive systems. C. Spinal cord and urinary systems. Answer: A. Central and peripheral nervous systems. The central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral system includes all nerves connecting to the rest of the body. Which cell type forms the protective myelin sheath in the central nervous system? A. Oligodendrocyte. B. Astrocyte. C. Microglia. Answer: A. Oligodendrocyte. Oligodendrocytes wrap segments of axons with myelin, which speeds the transmission of electrical impulses in the CNS. How fast can impulses travel along myelinated nerve fibers in the body? A. Up to 120 meters per second. B. Less than 10 meters per second. C. Approximately 500 meters per second. Answer: A. Up to 120 meters per second. Saltatory conduction along myelinated axons can allow nerve signals to reach speeds of 80 to 120 meters per second. What is the name of the jumping conduction of nerve impulses? A. Diffusive conduction. B. Saltatory conduction. C. Serial conduction. Answer: B. Saltatory conduction. Impulses jump between the nodes of Ranvier along a myelinated axon, enabling faster and more efficient signal transmission. Which fluid cushions and nourishes the brain and spinal cord? A. Cerebrospinal fluid. B. Lymph fluid. C. Synovial fluid. Answer: A. Cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid surrounds the central nervous system, provides a protective cushion, removes metabolic waste, and delivers nutrients. What is the term for a fast involuntary motor response processed by the spinal cord? A. Reflex arc. B. Sensory loop. C. Cerebral relay. Answer: A. Reflex arc. A reflex arc allows a rapid, involuntary motor response to a stimulus by routing signals through the spinal cord rather than the brain. Which division activates the fight or flight response? A. Sympathetic nervous system. B. Parasympathetic nervous system. C. Enteric nervous system. Answer: A. Sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic branch increases heart rate, blood pressure, and alertness to prepare the body for stress or danger. Which neurotransmitter is released at the neuromuscular junction to trigger contraction? A. Acetylcholine. B. Dopamine. C. Serotonin. Answer: A. Acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is released by motor neurons to stimulate skeletal muscle fibers and enable contraction. What structure protects the brain from many substances in the blood? A. Blood-brain barrier. B. Lymphatic drain. C. Cranial meninges. Answer: A. Blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier tightly regulates which molecules can enter the brain from circulation, protecting sensitive neural tissue. Which brain region coordinates balance, fine movement, and procedural motor learning? A. Cerebellum. B. Thalamus. C. Hypothalamus. Answer: A. Cerebellum. The cerebellum processes information about posture, coordination, and motor learning to refine movement precision. What part of a neuron receives incoming signals from other cells? A. Dendrites. B. Axon terminals. C. Myelin sheath. Answer: A. Dendrites. Dendrites are branching extensions that receive neurotransmitter signals from neighboring neurons and carry them toward the cell body. Which lobe of the brain is primarily responsible for visual processing? A. Occipital lobe. B. Temporal lobe. C. Parietal lobe. Answer: A. Occipital lobe. Located at the back of the brain, the occipital lobe interprets signals from the eyes to form visual perception. What ion enters the neuron during the depolarization phase of an action potential? A. Sodium. B. Potassium. C. Calcium. Answer A. Sodium. When a neuron fires, voltage-gated sodium channels open, allowing sodium ions to flood in and depolarize the membrane. Which brain structure serves as a relay station for sensory information? A. Thalamus. B. Hippocampus. C. Amygdala. Answer A. Thalamus. The thalamus receives input from sensory organs and forwards the information to appropriate areas of the cerebral cortex. Which part of the autonomic nervous system promotes digestion and energy storage? A. Parasympathetic nervous system. B. Sympathetic nervous system. C. Somatic nervous system. Answer A. Parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic system stimulates rest and digest functions such as reducing heart rate and increasing gastrointestinal activity. Section 4. Endocrine System. The endocrine system sends hormones into the bloodstream, regulating metabolism, growth, reproduction, and internal balance over longer time frames and across distant targets. What gland is known as the master gland because it controls other endocrine organs? A. Pituitary gland. B. Thyroid gland. C. Pancreas. Answer A. Pituitary gland. The pituitary gland produces hormones that regulate multiple endocrine targets, including thyroid, adrenal, and gonadal glands. Which hormone from the pituitary triggers cortisol release from the adrenal cortex? A. Adrenocorticotropic hormone. B. Thyroid stimulating hormone. C. Prolactin. Answer A. Adrenocorticotropic hormone. ACTH stimulates the adrenal cortex to produce cortisol, the body's main stress-related glucocorticoid. Which hormone raises blood calcium when levels are low? A. Parathyroid hormone. B. Calcitonin. C. Thyroxine. Answer A. Parathyroid hormone. PTH increases serum calcium by signaling bone to release calcium, kidney reabsorption, and enhancing intestinal absorption. Which hormone lowers high blood calcium levels by inhibiting bone resorption? A. Calcitonin. B. Cortisol. C. Insulin. Answer A. Calcitonin. Calcitonin, secreted by the thyroid's parafollicular cells, suppresses osteoclast activity to reduce blood calcium. Which pair of hormones produced by the pancreas regulate blood sugar in opposing directions? A. Insulin and glucagon. B. Somatostatin and leptin. C. Aldosterone and renin. Answer: A. Insulin and glucagon. Insulin lowers blood sugar by increasing cellular uptake, while glucagon raises it by mobilizing glucose from storage. Which hormones T3 and T4 are released by the thyroid gland primarily to control what? A. Metabolism and energy use. B. Water balance. C. Reproductive function. Answer: A. Metabolism and energy use. Thyroid hormone controls basal metabolic rate, oxygen consumption, and influences heart rate and temperature. Which hypothalamic hormone stimulates the release of TSH from the anterior pituitary? A. Thyrotropin-releasing hormone. B. Dopamine. C. Corticotropin-releasing hormone. Answer: A. Thyrotropin-releasing hormone. TRH signals the pituitary to release TSH, which in turn prompts the thyroid to secrete T3 and T4. Which hormone from the adrenal cortex increases sodium retention and blood volume? A. Aldosterone. B. Epinephrine. C. Cortisol. Answer: A. Aldosterone. Aldosterone enhances sodium reabsorption and water retention in the kidneys, raising blood pressure. Which brain-endar gland hormone regulates sleep-wake cycles and responds to darkness? A. Melatonin. B. Insulin. C. Cortisol. Answer: A. Melatonin. Melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland in darkness to help synchronize circadian rhythms and promote sleep. Which hormone promotes water retention and raises blood pressure during dehydration? A. Antidiuretic hormone. B. Aldosterone. C. Glucagon. Answer: A. Antidiuretic hormone. ADH, released from the posterior pituitary, increases water dilution reabsorption and constricts blood vessels to support volume. Which hormone, often called the stress hormone, increases blood sugar and suppresses inflammation? A. Cortisol. B. Prolactin. C. Thyroxine. Answer: A. Cortisol. Cortisol is released under stress, increases blood glucose, modulates immunity, and coordinates metabolic responses. Which hormone is responsible for uterine contractions during labor and milk ejection during breastfeeding? A. Oxytocin. B. Prolactin. C. Estrogen. Answer: A. Oxytocin. Oxytocin, produced by the hypothalamus and released by the posterior pituitary, stimulates uterine contractions and milk letdown during lactation. Which endocrine gland is located in the neck and shaped like a butterfly? A. Thyroid gland. B. Pituitary gland. C. Adrenal gland. Answer: A. Thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped organ at the base of the neck that regulates metabolism through secretion of T3 and T4. Which gland is part of both the endocrine and digestive systems? A. Pancreas. B. Adrenal gland. C. Hypothalamus. Answer: A. Pancreas. The pancreas produces insulin and glucagon for blood sugar regulation and also secretes digestive enzymes into the small intestine. Which hormone stimulates egg development in females and sperm production in males? A. Follicle-stimulating hormone. B. Luteinizing hormone. C. Progesterone. Answer: A. Follicle-stimulating hormone. FSH is secreted by the anterior pituitary and promotes gamete development in both sexes, follicles in ovaries and sperm in testes. What hormone is primarily responsible for the development of female secondary sex characteristics? A. Estrogen. B. Testosterone. C. Progesterone. Answer: A. Estrogen. Estrogen governs breast development, fat distribution, and reproductive organ maturation during puberty in females. Section 5. Reproductive System. The reproductive system consists of gonads and ducts that collaborate to produce gametes, support fertilization, carry pregnancy, and regulate hormonal functions. Which cells in the testes produce testosterone? A. Leydig cells. B. Sertoli cells. C. Germ cells. Answer: A. Leydig cells. Leydig cells in the testicular interstitial tissue produce testosterone under luteinizing hormone control. Which structure stores and matures sperm before ejaculation? A. Epididymis. B. Seminiferous tubules. C. Vas deferens. Answer: A. Epididymis. The epididymis is a coiled duct where sperm become motile and are temporarily stored. What term describes the process of sperm production in males? A. Spermatogenesis. B. Oogenesis. C. Meiosis. Answer: A. Spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis transforms diploid germ cells into mature sperm through mitosis and meiosis in the seminiferous tubules. Which gland contributes most of the fluid volume in semen? A. Seminal vesicles. B. Prostate gland. C. Bulbourethral glands. Answer: A. Seminal vesicles. Seminal vesicles produce alkaline fluid rich in fructose and prostaglandins that makes up about 60% of semen volume. On average, which day of a 28-day cycle does ovulation occur? A. Day 14. B. Day 7. C. Day 21. Answer: A. Day 14. Ovulation typically occurs around day 14 when a mature follicle releases an egg into the fallopian tube. Where does fertilization usually occur in the female reproductive tract? A. Ampulla of the fallopian tube. B. Uterine cavity. C. Cervix. Answer: A. Ampulla of the fallopian tube. The ampullary region of the fallopian tube is the most common site for sperm and egg uniting to form a zygote. Which hormone is released by the embryo to maintain the corpus luteum? A. Human chorionic gonadotropin. B. Progesterone. C. Estrogen. Answer: A. Human chorionic gonadotropin. HCG secreted by the implanted embryo supports the corpus luteum and progesterone production in early pregnancy. What is the name of the monthly shedding of the uterine lining? A. Menstruation. B. Ovulation. C. Fertilization. Answer: A. Menstruation. Menstruation is the breakdown and expulsion of the uterine endometrial lining when implantation does not occur. Which hormone promotes thickening of the endometrium in the luteal phase? A. Progesterone. B. Estrogen. C. Follicle-stimulating hormone. Answer: A. Progesterone. Progesterone, produced by the corpus luteum, prepares the uterine lining for possible implantation. Which organ receives the fertilized egg for implantation and supports early embryo development? A. Uterus. B. Cervix. C. Vagina. Answer: A. Uterus. The uterus provides the environment for embryo implantation, placental formation, and fetal growth. What structure secretes progesterone right after ovulation to maintain the uterine lining? A. Corpus luteum. B. Follicle. C. Endometrium. Answer: A. Corpus luteum. The corpus luteum, formed from the ruptured follicle, releases progesterone to keep the endometrium viable until the placenta forms. Which hormone from the pituitary gland surges to trigger ovulation in women? A. Follicle-stimulating hormone. B. Luteinizing hormone. C. Prolactin. Answer: B. Luteinizing hormone. A mid-cycle surge in luteinizing hormone induces the mature follicle to release its egg in ovulation. Which pituitary hormone promotes follicle growth and estrogen release before ovulation? A. Follicle-stimulating hormone. B. Luteinizing hormone. C. Human chorionic gonadotropin. Answer: A. Follicle-stimulating hormone. FSH stimulates the growth of ovarian follicles and the production of estrogen that prepares for ovulation. Which embryonic hormone supports progesterone production by maintaining the corpus luteum? A. Human chorionic gonadotropin. B. Progesterone. C. Estrogen. Answer: A. Human chorionic gonadotropin. The implanted embryo secretes HCG, signaling the corpus luteum to continue progesterone secretion until the placenta can take over. Which hormone exerts negative feedback to prevent another ovulation during the luteal phase? A. Progesterone. B. Estrogen. C. Inhibin. Answer: A. Progesterone. High progesterone levels during the luteal phase suppress GnRH and gonadotropin release, preventing another ovulation. Section 6. Sensory Systems. Sensory systems detect and translate environmental signals, like light, sound, chemicals, pressure, or temperature, into neural messages sent to the brain for perception. Which structures in the retina allow color vision in bright daylight? A. Rods. B. Cones. C. Ganglion cells. Answer: B. Cones. Cones, particularly the L, M, and S-type cone photoreceptors, enable fine color discrimination and high visual acuity in bright light. Which mechanoreceptor in the skin transduces sustained light touch near hair follicles? A. Meissner's corpuscles. B. Merkel discs. C. Ruffini endings. Answer: B. Merkel discs. Merkel cell neurite complexes, unencapsulated discs, detect fine touch, edges, and textures with high spatial resolution. Which receptor is specialized for detecting high-frequency vibration in the skin? A. Ruffini endings. B. Merkel discs. C. Pacinian corpuscles. Answer: C. Pacinian corpuscles. Pacinian corpuscles respond to deep pressure and high-frequency vibration via their rapidly adapting onion-like construction. What anatomical structure houses the organ of Corti and converts fluid motion to neural signals in hearing? A. Utricle. B. Cochlea. C. Semicircular canal. Answer: B. Cochlea. Within the snail-shaped cochlea, hair cells of the organ of Corti transduce pressure waves into electrical impulses carried by the vestibulocochlear nerve. Which cranial nerve carries hearing and balance information to the brainstem? A. Vestibulocochlear nerve, CN8. B. Facial nerve, CN7. C. Trigeminal nerve, CN5. Answer: A. Vestibulocochlear nerve, CN8. CN8 transmits auditory signals from the cochlea and balance signals from the vestibular apparatus semicircular canals, utricle and saccule. Which receptor type adapts slowly and signals sustained skin stretch, particularly in joint capsules? A. Ruffini endings. B. Pacinian corpuscles. C. Meissner's corpuscles. Answer: A. Ruffini endings. Ruffini corpuscles are slow-adapting mechanoreceptors that detect skin stretch and continuous pressure. Which sensory receptors respond to temperature changes and tissue damage via free nerve endings? A. Thermoreceptors and nociceptors. B. Meissner's corpuscles. C. Taste buds. Answer: A. Thermoreceptors and nociceptors. Free nerve endings transduce hot, cold, and noxious stimuli through TRP channels and a delta C fibers. Which cells detect odor molecules and relay input through the olfactory nerve? A. Gustatory cells. B. Olfactory receptor neurons. C. Basal epithelial cells. Answer: B. Olfactory receptor neurons. Specialized receptor neurons in the nasal mucosa bind odorants and send signals via the first cranial nerve, CNI. Which tongue papillae type contains the greatest density of taste buds and is structured in a V shape near the throat? A. Filiform papilla. B. Fungiform papilla. C. Circumvallate papillae. Answer: C. Circumvallate papillae. These large papillae line up in V formation near the posterior tongue and contain taste buds for bitter sensitivity. Which receptor membrane converts food chemicals into signals that detect flavor across all 5 taste modalities? A. Olfactory bulb. B. Taste receptors on taste buds. C. Merkel discs. Answer: B. Taste receptors on taste buds. Taste receptor cells within the taste buds detect sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami stimuli via chemoreceptors and ion channels. Which otolith organ responds to vertical acceleration, such as riding an elevator? A. Semicircular canal. B. Utricle. C. Saccule. Answer: C. Saccule. The saccule contains otoliths that detect linear acceleration along the vertical plane, e.g., up-down movements. Which type of lingual papillae is the most abundant but lacks taste buds entirely? A. Fungiform papilla. B. Filiform papillae. C. Circumvallate papillae. Answer: B. Filiform papillae. Filiform papillae cover most of the tongue surface and are keratinized for texture manipulation. They do not contain taste buds. Which cells actively amplify faint sounds in the cochlea by altering their length? A. Inner hair cells. B. Outer hair cells. C. Basilar membrane cells. Answer: B. Outer hair cells. Outer hair cells use somatic electromotility via Preston to amplify the traveling wave, enhancing sensitivity and frequency tuning. Which receptor is best for detecting continuous skin stretch and joint angle changes? A. Ruffini endings. B. Meissner's corpuscles. C. Free nerve endings. Answer: A. Ruffini endings. Ruffini receptors slowly adapt and report sustained stretch and joint movement rather than vibration or sharp pressure. Which nerve carries taste sensation from the back 1/3 of the tongue, including circumvallate papillae? A. Glossopharyngeal nerve, CN9. B. Facial nerve, CN7. C. Vagus nerve, CN10. Answer: A. Glossopharyngeal nerve, CN9. Taste from the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, including bitter and sour papillae, is transmitted via the glossopharyngeal nerve to the nucleus solitarius. Section 7. Circulatory System. The circulatory system includes the heart, blood vessels, and fluid components that transport oxygen, nutrients, wastes, and hormones throughout the body, while also helping regulate temperature, osmotic balance, and immunity. Let's begin. Which chamber of the heart receives oxygenated blood from the lungs? A. Left atrium. B. right atrium, C. right ventricle. Answer: A. left atrium. That chamber collects freshly oxygenated blood delivered via the pulmonary veins. Which valve prevents backflow from the aorta into the left ventricle? A. aortic valve, B. mitral valve, C. tricuspid valve. Answer: A. aortic valve. This semilunar valve closes during diastole to protect the ventricle from retrograde flow. Which vessel carries deoxygenated blood from the upper body to the right atrium? A. superior vena cava, B. inferior vena cava, C. pulmonary artery. Answer: A. superior vena cava. It returns venous blood from the head, neck, upper limbs, and chest directly to the heart. What adult resting heart rate range is considered normal? A. 60 to 100 beats per minute, B. 80 to 120 beats per minute, C. 40 to 60 beats per minute. Answer: A. 60 to 100 beats per minute. That range reflects typical resting rates in healthy adults. Which type of blood vessel has the thickest smooth muscle tunica media? A. artery, B. vein, C. capillary. Answer: A. artery. Arteries must withstand and help regulate the high pressure output from the heart. What is the normal arterial blood pH range? A. 7.35 to 7.45, B. 7.1 to 7.2, C. 7.8 to 7.9. Answer: A. 7.35 to 7.45. Healthy arterial pH is tightly maintained by respiratory and renal systems. Which type of white blood cell is most abundant in normal circulation? A. neutrophils, B. lymphocytes, C. monocytes. Answer: A. neutrophils. They act as first responders in most bacterial or fungal infections. Which plasma protein contributes most to maintaining colloid osmotic pressure? A. albumin, B. hemoglobin, C. fibrinogen. Answer: A. albumin. Albumin constitutes the bulk of osmotically active proteins in plasma. What is the name of the heart's natural pacemaker that initiates each beat? A. sinoatrial node, B. Atrioventricular node. C. Bundle of His. Answer: A. Sinoatrial node. It spontaneously depolarizes and triggers coordinated atrial contraction. Which clotting-related protein is converted into fibrin during coagulation? A. Fibrinogen. B. Vitamin K. C. Prothrombin. Answer: A. Fibrinogen. Thrombin cleaves fibrinogen to form insoluble fibrin strands that trap blood cells. Systolic blood pressure refers to the pressure in arteries while the heart is A. Contracting. B. Relaxing. C. Filling. Answer: A. Contracting. It measurement during the ventricular ejection into the arteries. Which hormone stimulates red blood cell production when oxygen levels are low? A. Erythropoietin. B. Thyroxine. C. Renin. Answer: A. Erythropoietin. Secreted primarily by the kidneys in response to hypoxia to increase erythropoiesis. Approximately how many liters of blood are in a typical adult body? A. 5 liters. B. 3 liters. C. 7 liters. Answer: A. 5 liters. Body weight, sex, and hydration can vary slightly, but approximately 5 liters is a standard average. Which blood type is considered the universal donor for red blood cell transfusion? A. O negative. B. AB positive. C. A positive. Answer: A. O negative. Lacks A, B, and Rh antigens, minimizing immune reactions in emergency transfusions. Which circuit carries blood from the left ventricle to the body tissues and back to the heart? A. Systemic circulation. B. Pulmonary circulation. C. Coronary circulation. Answer: A. Systemic circulation. Delivers oxygenated blood to organs, then returns deoxygenated blood via the venae cavae. Section 8. Respiratory System. The respiratory system includes the airways, lungs, diaphragm, pleura, and respiratory muscles that together ventilate the lungs and support gas exchange between blood and air. It also helps regulate blood pH. Which muscle contracts during inhalation, exposing the lungs to negative pressure to draw in air? A. Diaphragm. B. External intercostals. C. Internal intercostals. Answer: A. Diaphragm. The diaphragm is the primary muscle of quiet inspiration, contracting to expand thoracic volume and reduce intrathoracic pressure to draw air in. Which part of the upper airway conditions inhaled air by warming, humidifying, and filtering it before reaching the lungs? A. Nasal cavity. B. Pharynx. C. Larynx. Answer: A. Nasal cavity. The nasal cavity contains turbinates and mucosa that help warm, humidify, and filter inhaled air. What tiny sac-like structures at the ends of the respiratory tree serve as the main site of gas exchange? A. Alveoli. B. Bronchioles. C. Trachea. Answer: A. Alveoli. Millions of alveoli provide a large surface area and thin respiratory membrane for diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide with the pulmonary capillaries. Which alveolar cell type produces surfactant to reduce surface tension and prevent collapse? A. Type 2 pneumocytes. B. Type 1 pneumocytes. C. Alveolar macrophages. Answer: A. Type 2 pneumocytes. Type 2 pneumocytes synthesize and secrete pulmonary surfactant to lower alveolar surface tension and aid reinflation. What is the physiologic role of pulmonary surfactant in the alveoli? A. To reduce surface tension. B. To increase blood flow. C. To absorb carbon dioxide. Answer: A. To reduce surface tension. Surfactant coats alveolar fluid to reduce surface tension, improving lung compliance and preventing alveolar collapse at low volumes. What ratio compares alveolar ventilation to perfusion in the lungs? A. Ventilation perfusion ratio, V/Q. B. Cardiac output ratio. C. Oxygen diffusion ratio. Answer: A. Ventilation perfusion ratio. The V/Q ratio matches airflow, V, with blood flow. Q. Mismatches impair gas exchange and lead to hypoxemia. What phenomenon causes increased release of oxygen from hemoglobin when blood pH drops or CO2 rises? A. Bohr effect. B. Haldane effect. C. Oxygen cascade. Answer: A. Bohr effect. As CO2 rises or pH falls in tissues, hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen decreases, which promotes oxygen unloading, Bohr effect. Which sensors located in the carotid bodies respond quickly to low blood oxygen to stimulate breathing? A. Peripheral chemoreceptors. B. Central chemoreceptors. C. Pulmonary stretch receptors. Answer: A. Peripheral chemoreceptors. Carotid body chemoreceptors in the peripheral circulation detect hypoxemia and increase ventilation rapidly. Which brainstem neuronal group in the medulla is chiefly responsible for generating the inspiratory rhythm? A. Ventral respiratory group. B. Dorsal respiratory group. C. Pontine respiratory group. Answer: A. Ventral respiratory group. The ventral respiratory group includes the pre-Butzinger complex, which serves as the rhythm generator for inspiration. What is the function of pleural fluid between the lung surfaces? A. To lubricate and reduce friction. B. To store oxygen. C. To signal chemoreceptors. Answer: A. To lubricate and reduce friction. Pleural fluid in the pleural cavity provides lubrication so the lungs can glide smoothly during expansion and contraction. What volume of air approximately enters or exits during a single relaxed breath in a typical adult? A. 500 milliliters. B. 1000 milliliters. C. 200 milliliters. Answer: A. 500 milliliters. Tidal volume at rest for an average adult is around 500 milliliters per breath. What term describes the volume of air remaining in the lungs after maximal exhalation that cannot be measured by spirometry? A. Residual volume. B. Vital capacity. C. Functional residual capacity. Answer: A. Residual volume. Residual volume, typically around 1 to 1.5 liters, cannot be expelled and is calculated indirectly rather than measured directly with spirometry. What rigid airway contains C-shaped rings of cartilage to prevent collapse? A. Trachea. B. Larynx. C. Bronchus. Answer: A. Trachea. The trachea is reinforced by C-shaped cartilage rings that maintain its patency during breathing. What elastic flap swings down during swallowing to protect the airway? A. Epiglottis. B. Uvula. C. Soft palate. Answer: A. Epiglottis. During swallowing, the epiglottis folds down to cover the laryngeal inlet and prevent aspiration into the lungs. Which region of the airway begins gas exchange and contains alveoli, marking the start of the respiratory zone? A. Respiratory bronchioles. B. Terminal bronchioles. C. Conducting bronchioles. Answer: A. Respiratory bronchioles. Gas exchange begins in the respiratory bronchioles, where alveolar outpocketings appear and capillaries surround the airways. What pulmonary vessel carries oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the left atrium? A. Pulmonary veins. B. Pulmonary arteries. C. Bronchial veins. Answer: A. Pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins return oxygen-rich blood from the lungs to the left atrium as part of systemic circulation. Section 9. Immune System. The immune system includes specialized cells and organs working together to detect, neutralize, and remember foreign invaders, such as pathogens with two major arms: innate and adaptive immunity. Which immune system responds within hours to threats before antigen-specific memory develops? A. Innate immune system. B. Adaptive immune system. C. Nervous immune system. Answer: A. Innate immune system. The innate immune system reacts immediately with pre-formed, non-specific defenses. Which primary lymphoid organ is responsible for the maturation of T lymphocytes? A. Thymus. B. Bone marrow. C. Spleen. Answer: A. Thymus. The thymus is the site where T cells undergo selection and maturation. Which type of white blood cell is the most abundant phagocyte in acute bacterial infection? A. Neutrophil. B. Eosinophil. C. Basophil. Answer: A. Neutrophil. Neutrophils make up nearly half the circulating white blood cells and rush to infection sites. Which innate immune cell type can kill virus-infected or tumor cells without prior antigen exposure? A. Natural killer cells. B. B lymphocytes. C. Macrophages. Answer: A. Natural killer cells. Natural killer cells destroy cells that lack normal MHC1 expression and show stress markers. Which complement activation pathway requires antibody bound to antigen to initiate cascade? A. Classical complement pathway. B. Alternative complement pathway. C. Lectin complement pathway. Answer: A. Classical complement pathway. The classical pathway begins when C1 binds to antigen-antibody complexes. Which antibody class is most effective at activating complement via C1q binding? A. Immunoglobulin M. B. Immunoglobulin G. C. Immunoglobulin E. Answer: A. Immunoglobulin M. pentameric IgM binds C1q strongly and can initiate complement activation efficiently. What type of immunity is characterized by antigen-specific memory and long-term protection? A. Adaptive immunity. B. Innate immunity. C. Passive immunity. Answer: A. Adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity develops more slowly but produces memory B and T cells. Which cell type acts as a professional antigen-presenting cell to naive T helper cells? A. Dendritic cell. B. Neutrophil. C. Red blood cell. Answer: A. Dendritic cell. Dendritic cells capture antigen and migrate to lymph nodes to activate naive T cells. Which class of MHC molecules presents peptides to CD8+ cytotoxic T cells? A. MHC class 1. B. MHC class 2. C. MHC class 3. Answer: A. MHC class 1. MHC1 is expressed on almost all nucleated cells and presents endogenous peptides to CD8+ T cells. What signaling proteins are responsible for communication between immune cells and recruiting inflammation? A. Cytokines. B. Hormones. C. Neurotransmitters. Answer: A. Cytokines. Examples include interleukin-1 and tumor necrosis factor that drive inflammation and leukocyte activation. Which secondary lymphoid organ filters the blood and initiates immune responses in its white pulp? A. Spleen. B. Thymus. C. Pancreas. Answer: A. Spleen. The spleen removes blood-borne pathogens and holds immune cells in white pulp regions. Which immune response is mediated by IgE cross-linking on mast cells and histamine release? A. Immediate type 1 hypersensitivity. B. Delayed type 4 hypersensitivity. C. Antibody-dependent cellular cytotoxicity. Answer: A. Immediate type 1 hypersensitivity. Allergic reactions such as anaphylaxis result from IgE-mediated mast cell degranulation. What is the term for the process by which leukocytes squeeze between endothelial cells to reach sites of infection? A. Diapedesis. B. Opsonization. C. Clonal selection. Answer: A. Diapedesis. Diapedesis is the movement of white blood cells through the vessel wall into inflamed tissue. What happens when natural killer cells detect reduced MHC1 levels on target cells? A. NK cells kill that target cell. B. NK cells activate complement. C. NK cells differentiate into memory cells. Answer: A. NK cells kill that target cell. Loss or downregulation of MHC1 triggers NK cell cytotoxicity in tumor or infected cells. Which receptor on phagocytes binds to complement fragment C3b to enhance pathogen uptake? A. CR1 receptor. B. FC receptor. C. TLR4 receptor. Answer: A. CR1 receptor. CR1 binds C3b-coated microbes and promotes efficient phagocytosis. Section 10. Digestive System. The digestive system comprises organs that ingest food, chemically break down nutrients, absorb them into circulation, and eliminate waste. It includes the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small and large intestines, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Which enzyme in saliva begins the chemical digestion of starch? A. Salivary amylase. B. Lipase. C. Pepsin. Answer: A. Salivary amylase. Salivary amylase, betiolin, initiates starch breakdown right in the mouth, continuing until stomach acid halts its activity. Where does most nutrient absorption begin in the human digestive tract? A. Duodenum. B. Stomach. Cecum. Answer: A. Duodenum. The duodenum, the shortest but first segment of the small intestine, is where pancreatic enzymes, bile, and nutrients mix and initial absorption begins. Which hormone triggers the gallbladder to contract, releasing bile, and stimulates pancreatic enzyme secretion? A. Cholecystokinin, CCK. B. Gastrin. C. Secretin. Answer: A. Cholecystokinin. CCK is released from duodenal eye cells in response to fats and proteins, causing bile release and pancreatic enzyme secretion. Which gastric cell type secretes both hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor? A. Parietal cells. B. Chief cells. C. G cells. Answer: A. Parietal cells. Parietal cells, oxyntic cells, in the stomach, mucosa produce strong acid and intrinsic factor essential for vitamin B12 absorption. What is the name of the muscle at the top of the stomach that prevents acid from refluxing into the esophagus? A. Lower esophageal sphincter. B. Pyloric sphincter. C. Ileocecal valve. Answer: A. Lower esophageal sphincter. This circular muscle closes after swallowing to block gastric contents from flowing back upward, preventing reflux. Which organ stores and concentrates bile produced by the liver? A. Gallbladder. B. Pancreas. C. Duodenum. Answer: A. Gallbladder. The gallbladder holds about 30 to 80 milliliters of bile, concentrates it by absorbing water, and releases it to aid fat digestion when needed. Which cells of the pancreas are primarily responsible for synthesizing digestive enzymes such as lipase, amylase, and proteases? A. Acinar cells. B. Beta cells. C. Ductal cells. Answer: A. Acinar cells. Pancreatic acinar cells are exocrine secretory units rich in rough endoplasmic reticulum, producing most of the digestive enzymes released into the duodenum. What substance emulsifies dietary fats in the small intestine to facilitate enzymatic digestion? A. Bile salts. B. Gastric lipase. C. Trypsin. Answer: A. Bile salts. Amphipathic bile salts reduce large fat droplets into micelles, vastly increasing the surface area for lipase action. Which segment of the small intestine is the initial site that receives chyme, bile, and pancreatic juice and begins nutrient absorption? A. Duodenum. B. Ileum. C. Jejunum. Answer: A. Duodenum. The duodenum is where acidic chyme is neutralized by bicarbonate, mixes with secretions, and absorption begins. What blood vessel transports nutrient-rich venous blood from the gastrointestinal tract and spleen to the liver? A. Hepatic portal vein. B. Inferior vena cava. C. Hepatic artery. Answer: A. Hepatic portal vein. The portal vein drains blood from the stomach, intestines, pancreas, and spleen into the liver for nutrient processing and detoxification. Which portion of the colon is the first section encountered after the small intestine and is involved in absorbing water and salts? A. Ascending colon. B. Sigmoid colon. C. Descending colon. Answer: A. Ascending colon. The ascending colon begins at the cecum and continues to absorb water, electrolytes, and bacteria-derived nutrients. Which vitamin depends on intrinsic factor binding in the stomach to be absorbed later in the distal ileum? A. Vitamin B12. B. Vitamin C. C. Vitamin D. Answer: A. Vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 must bind to intrinsic factor produced by parietal cells before being absorbed via receptors in the distal ileum. Where in the digestive system does the majority of water and electrolyte absorption occur? A. Colon, large intestine. B. Stomach. C. Duodenum. Answer: A. Colon, large intestine. The colon reclaims most of the remaining water and electrolytes from indigestible residue before feces formation. Which cells in the pancreatic ducts secrete bicarbonate into the duodenum to neutralize acidic chyme? A. Ductal cells. B. Islet cells. C. Parietal cells. Answer: A. Ductal cells. Pancreatic ductal cells release high pH bicarbonate fluid that neutralizes stomach acid and provides optimal pH for enzymes in the duodenum. What is the most efficient site for absorption of fat-soluble vitamins? A, D, E, and K. A. Duodenum and upper jejunum. B. Stomach. C. Distal ileum. Answer: A. Duodenum and upper jejunum. The fat-soluble vitamins are absorbed in micellar form, primarily in the duodenum and proximal jejunum, where bile salts are abundant. Section 11. Muscular System. The muscular system includes skeletal, myocardium, and smooth muscles that enable movement, posture, heat production, and circulation. Most questions focus on skeletal muscle physiology and types. Which primary protein forms the thick filament in skeletal muscle and engages in cross-bridge cycling? A. Myosin. B. Actin. C. Titin. Answer: A. Myosin. Myosin molecules with globular heads pull actin to contract sarcomers during muscle shortening. Which type of muscle fiber is slow contracting, rich in mitochondria, and highly resistant to fatigue? A. Type 1, slow twitch. B. Type 2, A. Fast oxidative. C. Type 2, B. Fast glycolytic. Answer: A. Type 1, slow twitch. Slow twitch fibers support prolonged activities like posture and endurance running. Which neurotransmitter is released at the neuromuscular junction to initiate skeletal muscle contraction? A. Acetylcholine. B. Dopamine. C. Gamma aminobutyric acid. Answer: A. Acetylcholine. AC binds receptors on the muscle fiber's sarcolemma to depolarize and trigger contraction. What high-energy molecule donates a phosphate to regenerate ATP within seconds of muscular effort? A. Creatine phosphate. B. Glycogen. C. ATP synthetase. Answer: A. Creatine phosphate. Creatine kinase transfers phosphate from phosphocreatine to ADP to rapidly resupply ATP. According to the sliding filament theory, muscle shortening occurs as which filaments slide past each other? A. Actin and myosin. B. Tropomyosin and titin. C. Troponin and actin. Answer: A. Actin and myosin. Myosin heads pull on actin filaments, causing sarcomer length to decrease and force to develop. What network of tubules within muscle fiber stores and releases calcium ions during contraction? A. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. B. Golgi apparatus. C. Mitochondrial matrix. Answer: A. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. The SR surrounds myofibrils and releases calcium ions to initiate the troponin-tropomyosin conformational change. What term describes a motor neuron and all of the skeletal muscle fibers it innervates? A. Motor unit. B. Neuromuscular bundle. C. Synaptic cluster. Answer: A. Motor unit. A single motor neuron and its fibers contract together, controlling force and precision. What metabolic byproduct accumulates in active muscle when oxygen is limited? A. Lactic acid. B. Creatine kinase. C. Carbonic anhydrase. Answer: A. Lactic acid. Anaerobic glycolysis produces lactate when ATP demand outpaces oxygen delivery. Which contraction type generates tension but does not change muscle length? A. Isometric contraction. B. Isotonic contraction. C. Isokinetic contraction. Answer: A. Isometric contraction. Muscle contracts without moving a load, as during plank holds or pushing against an immovable object. Which muscle tissue type is found in vessel walls and is involuntary and non-striated? A. Smooth muscle. B. Cardiac muscle. C. Skeletal muscle. Answer: A. Smooth muscle. It lines hollow organs and blood vessels to regulate diameter and movement without conscious control. Which regulatory protein binds calcium to shift tropomyosin and enable actin-myosin interaction? A. Troponin. B. Tropomyosin. C. Titin. Answer: A. Troponin. Calcium binding to troponin moves tropomyosin aside and exposes actin sites for cross-bridge formation. What connective tissue sheath surrounds each bundle, fascicle of muscle fibers? A. Paramecium. B. Endomecium. C. Epimecium. Answer: A. Paramecium. Paramecium encases fascicles, grouping fibers for coordinated function and force transmission. Which muscle pair serve opposing actions at the elbow? A. Biceps brachii and triceps brachii. B. Latissimus dorsi and deltoid. C. Flexor carpi ulnaris and pronator teres. Answer: A. Biceps brachii and triceps brachii. The biceps flexes the elbow while the triceps extends it, working in opposition to control motion. What tissue connects muscle to bone and transmits force for movement? A. Tendon. B. Ligament. C. Bursa. Answer: A. Tendon. Tendons anchor muscles to bones and focus contraction forces into skeletal motion. What long-term adaptation increases type 2 fiber size in response to strength training? A. Hypertrophy. B. Hyperplasia. C. Atrophy. Answer: A. Hypertrophy. Pumping iron increases myofibril diameter and contractile proteins in fast-twitch fibers, boosting strength. Section 12. Skeletal System. The skeletal system includes 206 bones, supports body structure, protects organs, produces blood cells, and stores minerals. These questions focus on bone structure, cell types, anatomy, and joint form. Which part of the skeleton includes the vertebrae, skull, rib cage, and sternum, the core bones supporting posture and protecting vital organs? A. Axial skeleton. B. Appendicular skeleton. C. Sesamoid skeleton. Answer: A. Axial skeleton. This central division includes 80 bones arranged along the body's axis to stabilize and protect the brain and internal organs. Which bone cell is primarily responsible for building new organic matrix and initiating mineralization? A. Osteoblast. B. Osteoclast. C. Chondrocyte. Answer: A. Osteoblast. Osteoblasts secrete collagenous osteoid and coordinate deposition of calcium phosphate crystals to form mature bone tissue. Which cell degrades bone by acid and enzyme secretion, to regulate calcium levels in the blood. A. Osteoclast. B. Osteocyte. C. Osteoblast. Answer: A. Osteoclast. Osteoclasts are large multinucleated cells that dissolve mineralized bone matrix and digest organic components for remodeling. What hard crystalline mineral, made of calcium, phosphate, and hydroxide, gives bone its rigidity and compression strength? A. Hydroxyapatite. B. Collagen. C. Elastin. Answer: A. Hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite, C5PO430H, is the inorganic component of bone providing stiffness and mineral storage. In a long bone, which region houses yellow bone marrow within the shaft and contributes to weight distribution? A. Diaphysis. B. Epiphysis. C. Metaphysis. Answer: A. Diaphysis. The diaphysis is the tubular shaft of long bones filled with yellow adipose marrow and surrounded by dense, compact bone. Which tissue layer covering bone contains blood vessels, nerves, osteogenic cells, and is essential for growth and repair? A. Periosteum. B. Endosteum. C. Perichondrium. Answer: A. Periosteum. The peristeum has inner osteogenic cells and outer fibrovascular layers that support healing and nourish cortical bone. Which region at both ends of a long bone contains spongy bone and red bone marrow for hematopoiesis? A. Epiphysis. B. Diaphysis. C. Medullary cavity. Answer: A. Epiphysis. The epiphyses, bone ends, are made of trabecular bone and house red marrow for ongoing blood cell production. Which principle states that bone adapts its structure over time to resist the mechanical loads it experiences? A. Wolff's Law. B. Heuter-Volkmann Principle. C. Frank Starling Law. Answer: A. Wolff's Law. Under mechanical stress, bone remodels by increasing density or alignment to reinforce load-bearing areas. What type of synovial joint allows rotation around a single axis, such as between the atlas and axis vertebrae? A. Pivot joint. B. Hinge joint. C. Ball and socket joint. Answer: A. Pivot joint. Pivot joints allow the atlas, C1, to rotate around the dens of the axis, C2, enabling head-shaking movements. Which term refers to the layered structural unit in compact bone made of concentric lamellae around a central canal? A. Osteon. B. Trabecula. C. Diploa. Answer: A. Osteon. Osteons, Haversian systems, are cylindrical units of compact bone containing blood vessels and osteocytes. In children, what cartilage structure at a bone's metaphysis allows growth and length before it closes in early adulthood? A. Epiphyseal growth plate. B. Periosteum. C. Medullary cavity. Answer: A. Epiphyseal growth plate. This cartilage disc is replaced by bone over time, allowing long bone elongation until skeletal maturity. Which tissue primarily stores fat and can convert back to blood-forming marrow in times of need? A. Yellow bone marrow. B. Red bone marrow. C. Mesenchymal marrow. Answer: A. Yellow bone marrow. Located in the medullary cavities, yellow marrow is adipose tissue that can revert to red marrow during extreme metabolic demands. Which hormone secreted by the thyroid reduces blood calcium levels by inhibiting bone resorption? A. Calcitonin. B. Parathyroid hormone. C. Growth hormone. Answer: A. Calcitonin. Calcitonin acts on osteoclasts to slow bone breakdown, lowering calcium release into the bloodstream. What is the final phase of bone fracture healing where bone is rebuilt and reshaped to restore its original form? A. Remodeling phase. B. Callus formation. C. Inflammatory phase. Answer: A. Remodeling phase. In this final stage, woven bone is replaced with strong lamellar bone and medullary structures are restored. Section 13. Integumentary System. The integumentary system includes skin, hair, nails, glands, and sensory receptors, the body's largest organ system. It protects the body, regulates temperature, allows touch sensation, and synthesizes vitamin D. What is the largest organ in the body by surface area and mass? A. Skin. B. Liver. C. Intestines. Answer: A. Skin. The skin covers roughly 1.5 to 2 square meters and makes up around 12 to 15% of total body weight. Which epidermal layer forms the primary barrier to microbes, chemicals, and water loss? A. Stratum corneum. B. Stratum spinosum. C. Stratum granulosum. Answer: A. Stratum corneum. This outer layer of dead, flattened cells embedded in lipids protects the epidermis from abrasion and pathogens. Which cell type makes up about 90% of all cells in the epidermis? A. Keratinocytes. B. Melanocytes. C. Langerhans cells. Answer: A. Keratinocytes. They produce keratin and lipids, forming the structural barrier and moisture regulation of the skin. Which pigment-producing cell resides in the basal layer and protects against UV radiation? A. Melanocyte. B. Keratinocyte. C. Sebaceous cell. Answer: A. Melanocyte. Melanocytes transfer melanin to surrounding cells to shield DNA from ultraviolet damage. Which compound does the skin produce when UVB converts 7-dehydrocholesterol? A. Melatonin. B. Vitamin D3 cholecalciferol. C. Serotonin. Answer: B. Vitamin D3 cholecalciferol. This precursor is later converted in the liver and kidneys into active hormone to regulate calcium and phosphorus levels. At approximately what pH is the skin's acid mantle on the surface? A. pH 7, neutral. B. pH 5, slightly acidic. C. pH 9, alkaline. Answer: B. pH 5, slightly acidic. This acidity level helps inhibit pathogenic microbes and maintain skin barrier integrity. Which fibrous protein provides tensile strength and elasticity in the dermis? A. Elastin. B. Collagen. C. Keratin. Answer: B. Collagen. Collagen fibers prevent tears and provide structural resilience, while elastin allows stretching and recoil. Which sebaceous structure secretes oily sebum to lubricate skin and hair follicles? A. Sebaceous gland. B. Eccrine sweat gland. C. Mammary gland. Answer: A. Sebaceous gland. These glands use holocrine secretion to produce an oily layer that softens skin and reduces water loss. Which gland helps cool the body through sweat evaporation across large skin areas? A. Eccrine sweat gland. B. Sebaceous gland. C. Ceruminous gland. Answer: A. Eccrine sweat gland. Widely distributed across skin, these ducts release fluid that evaporates to dissipate heat. What tiny muscle attached to a hair follicle causes goosebumps when it contracts? A. Arrector pili. B. Papillary muscle. C. Cutaneous duct. Answer A. Erector pili. These smooth muscles erect hairs in response to cold or emotion to trap insulating air layers. Which specialized epidermal cell detects sustained touch and pressure? A. Merkel cell. B. Free nerve ending. C. Meissner corpuscle. Answer A. Merkel cell. Merkel cells form synapses with nerve endings to relay fine touch discrimination and textures. Which corpuscle in the dermal papillae responds to fine light touch and texture changes? A. Pacinian corpuscle. B. Meissner's corpuscle. C. Ruffini ending. Answer B. Meissner's corpuscle. Rapidly adapting receptors in glabrous skin that sense edges and fluttering touch stimuli. What is the term for a thickened patch of skin formed by repeated friction or pressure on the stratum corneum? A. Callus. B. Blister. C. Cyst. Answer A. Callus. The skin responds by increasing corneocyte production and cornification where pressure occurs regularly. Fingernails are composed of hard keratin derived embryologically from which skin layer? A. Epidermis. B. Dermis. C. Hypodermis. Answer A. Epidermis. Nail plates develop from the nail matrix, a specialized part of the epidermis with active keratinocyte division. Approximately how long does it take for a skin cell to migrate from the basal layer to be shed from the surface? A. About 4 weeks. B. 2 hours. C. 6 months. Answer A. About 4 weeks. Keratinocyte life cycle, from division to desquamation, takes around 28 days in young adults.